you this morning. It's so good to see you all. This is the last week of the semester. I know there are many, many things on your mind, both academically and perhaps personally, with all the things that are going on in the world. So grateful to have you all here this morning. Let me just try to move my slide forward. Okay, there we go. So this is how do you find a job during COVID or job search during COVID? I know that, given the pandemic we've experienced the last 2 years, even though it felt like, way longer than that, there are a lot of things that definitely has changed. And, so what we're really hoping to do is give you perhaps some new ideas, creative ideas. Hopefully it might sort of spark a little bit of your idea being creative when it comes to job search. So it is going to be a, action and information packed hour. So there are lots of things going to be covered, but we will definitely, wanted to also hear your questions. But before anything, I really like to acknowledge that at SFU, we acknowledge that we are located on the unceded territory on the shared traditional Coast Salish lands of the Musqueam peoples, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kikite, Kwanlin, Semiahmoo, and Tawasan peoples on whose traditional territories our 3 campuses reside. Today I'm joining you from my home in Burnaby, where it's the people of the Coast Salish lands as well, and I'm really, really grateful to be able to be on this land, because on top of being I'm also an immigrant to this land, so I'm grateful that I can learn, live, and play in this wonderful lands. So I wanted to acknowledge that, and I also wanted to point out that this morning, you might be in a place where there's lots on your mind. Like we talk about that this is the end of the semester. You might be thinking about that. You're obviously thinking about your job search. That's why you're here. And I also know that many of us are thinking about the invasion to Ukraine from Russia, so which is absolutely so terrifying and traumatic, and my heart goes out to all the Ukrainians who are affected. So if you are thinking and it's weighing on your mind, I just want to say that you're not alone. And not to mention that we're still in a pandemic, right? So if you feel like there's so many layers of emotions that you're experiencing this morning, you are definitely not alone, and and we're and many of us are experiencing something like that as well. Victoria kind of highlighted a few housekeeping things. The event is being recorded right now, but the chats will not be, and Zoom is only recording the speaker screen, so you don't have to worry about even your sort of blank screen is being recorded. Again, if you wanted to change your display name to a preferred name and update your pronouns, that's cool too. Cameras, your choice. It's all about what you feel comfortable. So do whatever you do to make yourself comfortable in the next hour. I also wanted to emphasize again that live captioning is available, for accessibility reason or for any other reason you want to see the live transcription or the closed captioning. You can just go to your Zoom menu and click Show Subtitle, and and you'll be able to see that. In addition, Victoria will also be kindly supporting us with any tech and accessibility issue. So if you can just DM her in the background, and she will be standing by to support all of you. In case if you're wondering, the slides will be shared because there are going to be a few different links throughout different slides, and don't worry about sort of taking notes or anything. We will get you the slides, or I should be more specific, Victoria will be so kind to share the slides with you. Give credit where credit is due, and you'll get that shortly after the shortly after the session. for those of you who are wondering, I want to make sure that I have lots of opportunity to answer questions because job search is such a huge topic. But I know that many of you may have specific questions on your mind. I'm hoping that the last 15 minutes will be a good Q&A, and we'll have a Slido. Oops, I'll talk about that later. So we'll make sure we'll take lots of questions, and also a big thank you to all the questions that you have put in when you register for this session is in the little window in the corner of my screen. I'll keep that in mind. I might not be able to address all of them, but but I'll try to prioritize the questions that are happening during the session. But I'll also touch on some of the things that many of you have asked. So far, so good. Okay, so. Yeah, just a really sort of general agenda of what we're going to cover. We're going to start with talking about employers' perspective, right? It's really it's really insightful to sort of see job search not only from where we are as job seekers, but also from employers' perspective. And then we're going to have some really fresh and new ideas about leveling up your tools and also optimizing your strategies. And like I said, we'll make sure that the last 15 minutes is going to be Q&A. All right, so okay, really want to talk about this. So Nicole, if you can so kind to drop the yes, thank you. You're ready to go. So we want to do lots of interaction on Slido. So a couple of things. If you go to slido.com and put in the hashtag FCAT job search, you will see right now currently you will see a Q&A box, so you can actually put in your questions anytime throughout the workshop. I'll try to keep an eye on it. If there's something that needs to be addressed right away, I will. If not, we'll do that at the end of that of that 15 minutes. And we also have some poll questions sort of throughout, so if you have another extra browser window or on your phone, whichever is easier, you can also scan the QR code. So we would love to hear from you and have some interaction through Slido. Okay, so let's start with this, right? I really enjoy sitting down with students to talk about the situation, learning about the questions they have in mind. And one thing that I'm always mindful about is that, wow, like this job search thing, it could be a roller coaster. It could be heavy, on the mind, on the heart, on the whole being. And I wanted to first acknowledge that this is really part of that whole experience, right? It's not just how you write your resume, it's just how you not just how you do interview, but sort of the emotions, part of it, right? At the same time, we're all different. We all have different backgrounds. So I don't want to acknowledge, I don't want to assume that everyone experiences the same thing. So as a start, I just want to sort of get a general sense of, hey, what emotions have you experienced in job search? It could just be a one-word answer. It's completely anonymous. So if you go to the Slido, Slido poll right now, you'll be able to see that question, what emotions have you experienced? And you can quickly jot a word or two. And the great thing about having a word cloud is that it will show us sort of collectively what we're all experiencing. So so let me know if there are any technical issue. But right now that question on Slido is open, so you can put your emotions that you've experienced in job search over there. And for many of you, if you have yet to start that process, you can also describe, even anticipating job search. What are you feeling, right? So that's cool too. So I want to give you a couple minutes to do that. I'm just going to keep moving the slides forward, but I will revisit that at some point. Not at some point, in a couple of slides. Yes. 80,000 hours. I don't know if sort of this 80,000 hours, whether immediately what that number is alluded to. But one of the things that, when people do the research, we will be spending in our lifetime 80,000 hours. And that's not even assuming when you do overtime, or when you work extra years or whatever, right? 80,000 hours in our work. Right. So work is not just, not just a small part of our life. It's a pretty big chunk of our lives. Right. So part of the question is, how are you intended to use that time? Right. Even though we look at, career in a much sort of wider perspective, much wider perspective. And it's not just, when you are at work, but also, but also time that you do when you're not getting paid. So it's really important that you think about what is it that you really want to do in your life, not just, any job or any occupation that you want, but the job that you want. So think about that. And I just realized that I forgot to introduce myself. So thank you, Nicole. Nicole, do you want to start? And then I will introduce myself. Oh my goodness, it's been quite a morning. Go ahead, Nicole.
No, it's all good, Albert. I just put it in the chat, but for those of you who didn't see, my name is Nicole, and I'm a co-op student at Career and Volunteer Services.
Thank you. And my name is Albert, and I am a career education manager with Career and Volunteer Services. Just celebrated my 10th year, supporting students at SFU. But I've also once a confused and anxious undergrad student, and so that's why I'm really, passionate about supporting students who are going through what I'd experienced back then. Yet I didn't really quite reach out to seek help. So yeah, so thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. I just need to quickly jot that introduction here. So this is also a good segue. Thank you, many of you who've just sort of jot your emotions. Let me just quickly switch my share screen just to see that. Hang on a second. There we go. Okay. So this is a word cloud that we have so far. Indecisiveness, anxiety, imposter syndrome. I'm very familiar with that, imposter syndrome, am I good enough for this? Am I ready? Do I deserve to get paid, right? I can definitely, resonate with that. Anxious, frustrating, excitement. Yeah. And, I really like that there's also sort of emotions on sort of, the different side of the spectrum, right? As much as it's exciting, it is also frustrating. It is also very, anxious. So as we're going through sort of all these emotions together, and we'll sort of, we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the workshop, is that, hopefully some of the ideas and skills that, or strategies that we're going to share with you, hopefully alleviate that a little bit. I definitely won't say it's going to take all your anxiety away, because it won't, but part of it is to be able to give you some ideas, but we'll also emphasize that towards the end that, hey, it takes a team to support you. It takes multiple different sort of support to go through this. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but thank you for sharing, what you were going through. And I can definitely, I'm sure many of us sort of resonate with that as well. So, okay, so back to the slides. So one really nice sort of meme or Instagram, we found this on Instagram, from one of these influencer, and it's this idea of how you measure success, right? It's really, really interesting that if you look at the top part of the picture, most often than not, whether it's in the media or sometimes in just casual social conversations, it feels like, anyone's worth is being measured by how much money you make, what job title are you, right? It's just sort of very, sort of on the surface, right? But what is really interesting is that, if we dig a little bit deeper, I think there's more than that, right? We might not always mention it. What about our physical health? What about our mental health? What about the free time, time that we get to do what we enjoy doing, and how about well-being? And, and again, every one of us have a different pie, and we'll have different kind of slices, but what I also encourage everyone is, so think about what your pie looks like, what defines your meaning of success, right? It's definitely more than just how much money you make and where you work or job title. And yes, so let's talk about employers' perspective. Nicole, can you tell us a little bit of a story?
Yeah. So Jane and Tiffany started a new organization that is rapidly growing, and they realized that there's a heavy workload and that they need to hire a new project coordinator. So Jane decides to do some research on the process of hiring and begins prepping a job description, but she soon becomes overwhelmed, so she decided to take a break. So while she's walking down the hallway, she runs into Nicola and they start a short conversation. And Jane informs Nicola that she's looking to hire a new project coordinator. And then Nicola remembers this person, Jen, whom she'd met earlier, and she told Jane about her. So Jane and Nicola take a look at Jen's background and see that she could be a really good fit for the position. And so they decide to interview Jen, and then they offered her the job. And so the story really speaks to the idea that there are more ways to get jobs out there than we know, and that this is why networking and talking with people is so important. And Jen got the job through someone she knew rather than going through the whole process. And in turn, it was actually easier for the employer to find someone as well.
Thank you, Nicole. And that's, and as much as it is a sort of like a story with sort of imagine names, but the situation is very much closer to the reality, right? Depending on what research you look at, they said somewhere around 80% of jobs are not posted, right? So imagine what all the postings that we see on any job posting site. Think that that's only 20% of what is available. So that's another 80% out there not posted, right? And, and if you think about sort of like, how we've been doing our job search, right? 75% of people use online application as a primary method of searching. So, that's all they do is look at job postings and apply. And if you think about all those people who apply, only 2% get through the door for an interview, and only not 1%, but one person get hired. So think about all your competition, right? And studies show that 70 to 85% of opportunities are found through connections. So what is really interesting is that think of this as which quote unquote lineup, right? Because, you can either compete with everybody who are applying online, just like where you are, but as the story that Nicole just shared with us, you can also connect to opportunities that are not even advertised yet through your connection, right? So it's not necessarily one is better than other, but do you have multiple ways of looking for work? So one of the biggest myths that we share with students is that applying, one of the things that we all do, right? Applying online to as many jobs as you can is the best job search strategy, right? So obviously, we just kind of talk about that. Applying online is one part of an effective job search strategy, but it cannot be your only job search strategy. So what are the other ones? Just stay tuned. Is coming up. And then another myth is once I get this degree, I'll stand out, right? Meaning that, maybe sometimes there's that perception there. Once I graduated, if I show people that I've graduated from SFU, from this amazing program, I'll stand out, I'll get work. But the reality is, yes, your degree is a big part of it, but you are also a person of many, many different, different areas, right? Beyond your education, there's also your skills, there's also your experience. We are being evaluated, right, holistically as a candidate. So your education matters, but everything else also matters. So as a result, part of it is when we are about to embark in that job search journey, there are a couple of things you want to think about, right? Number one is focus your time and energy, right? Identify challenges that you want to work on and develop a list of 10 to 20 target employers, right? Like, what are the organization that you want to work for? Do you even know who are the organizations that have work that you are curious about? Right. So this is something, is worth thinking about. Do a skills audit, right? One thing that I can't say enough is that your education has, helped you develop lots of skills. So as your part-time job, your volunteering, all that stuff, all that. And it might not be obvious. So part of it takes a little bit of time to reflect on it, to do a little bit of audit and identify the skills that you have developed, so that you're, because in order to share this with an employer or a recruiter, you have to know it yourself, right? And last but not least is consider a stopgap approach, right? Some of the questions that I get through the registration is, well, what if I don't have a lot of experience? What if I just, sort of started this because I've been so focused in school, right? I would say it's never too late, right? But sometimes in some situations, if you feel like, okay, maybe I can just sort of get a job just to support myself. It's not really what I wanted, but it gives me a little bit of time to explore, to build up experience, to volunteer. If that is an option, for you, it also doesn't hurt, right? Like, you might not get to where you want to be right after graduation or right at this moment. But consider a stopgap approach to think about what you want to do next and build up some experience and create some connections, right? So identifying what's out there. So I'm going to be sharing something in terms of a list of resources, but I just want to say, do a little bit of online research, right? One thing that you might or might not know is that even within Google, if you Google job posting, Google has their own job posting site as well, right? And sort of looking at what's available, what's out there, definitely sort of check out some of these different sites and also speak to people, right? And LinkedIn is a fabulous place, to start, and we're going to be doing some demo later on, but definitely, talk to people. At career fairs, talk to people at industry associations, mentor programs. Yeah, think about who you can talk to get more information about what's out there. So, for example, this site called Worksica, you can actually pull up some data about what are the jobs that are available at this point, who are some of the folks that are organizations that you're hiring. So definitely check out some of these websites to gain some more information. Another good place to check is also the West Coast Virtual Fair. So I don't know if many of you have heard of this, but earlier in March, we just have our second virtual fair of the year. So during the pandemic, SFU has pivoted to offer the career fair online. And you probably wonder, well, why are you mentioning it? Like the fair is over. Well, yes and no, right? Now being at a virtual fair, even though the appointments to meet recruiters are not available anymore, but you can still log in to check out some of the organizations that are hiring, what the positions that they're offering, and the different organizations out there. So as an SFU student, you have access to that, and I'll make sure that to include some links in the slides so that you can check it out afterwards. So one of the things to keep in mind is, as Jeremy Streifling mentioned in this article, hiring doesn't favor the best candidate. It favors the candidate who can best solve the hiring team's pain. So take a moment to think about that, right? It's not so much they need a warm body to sit behind a desk or in front of a screen, right? It's that for every company, every organization, they have a goal to reach. They have problems to solve, and they need people who are skillful, smart, and hardworking like you to solve that, to solve those problems. What they do not know is who that person would be, right? So if we can sort of, even make a small attempt to try to put ourselves in the employer's shoes and say, hey, what are they going through? What is the pain point, and how can I be part of the solution, right? So this is sort of one way of sort of shifting that perspective. So, in a response to that, would love to share a few sort of new ideas with you in terms of ideas that help you sort of shape how you can most better position yourself to communicate that you are part of the solution, or you are able to contribute to solve some of those problems in these sort of standout toolkit. There we go. So let's start with highlight a few things about your resumes, right? Your bullet statements, right? One of the hardest things to do well when it comes to resume is bullet statement. What do I write? So one thing to really think about is this point is, don't just describe what you did. So for example, I wrote monthly newsletters, right? Or I talk to customers, or I deal with customers, but talk about what the impact is, right? Show, don't tell. I wrote monthly newsletter. I wrote monthly Career Center newsletter that gained 1,000 more subscribers in 6 months, right? Quantifying, describing the impact, including some evidence always goes a long way, right? Another thing that we don't get to talk about enough, again, it was already quite prevalent before the pandemic, is even more so, is applicant tracking system. This is just a fancy word that if you're basically applying to any jobs that that ask you to upload your resume or copy and paste the content on your resume in a web form, this is essentially applicant tracking system, meaning that depending on the system, most of the time is that the algorithm behind the scenes, they are scanning the content of the applicant's information and resume and try to shortlist this to some degree before a recruiter actually checks it, right? So something you want to think about is, how do you sort of beat the system at their game, right? Like you have to understand what they're trying to do. So main part of that is, you want to make sure that you use standard headings and standard fonts, because when you're copy and pasting things over, formatting just sort of go out of the window. But also making sure that the keywords that you've chosen align very well with the job posting. So make sure you take some time, analyze the job postings, understand what they're looking for, make sure the keywords sort of align with that. So keep in mind, again, the formatting, and the quirky job titles, you want it to be as sort of explicit as possible, because sometimes those algorithms, all they really are looking for is keywords that whether they match or not. They're, I don't think they're as sophisticated yet to sort of read between the lines. So keep in mind that. So there's a really good tool called jobscan.com. If you ever wonder, like, did my resume, if I submit it online, does it match the job description, right? So this is a really good tool. Check it out, that you can upload the job description of a job that you're interested in, and also copy and paste the content of your resume. And then the system works kind of like an applicant tracking system, will give you a score of how well you match, what you might be missing. So definitely check out this tool. And of course, when it comes to resume, that visual, really important too. And I know I may be preaching to the choir here, because we've probably got some SFU students here. We've got some communication students. People will understand sort of the visual, but also keep in mind that, it is also important about your audience, right? If you're definitely in a field, if you're looking for design work, like, obviously, you want your resume to reflect your design ability, right? So, but again, you don't have to start from scratch, right? Like, I know I'm pointing out the obvious. Check out, resume templates on Canvas. There are lots to choose from. And the idea is that, you don't necessarily just have to follow one template, right? Pick different ideas that suits you. So modify to suit your needs, the way you stand out, the color scheme that you want, and, make you stand out in a unique way. And there's also video resumes as well. So, and Nicole, if you don't mind dropping the link there. So check it out when you have a chance. We won't be able to, we won't have time to show it here. But it's, it's getting more and more common, for folks to create video, video resumes. And we've even been learning from students who are applying for work that, a part of the application is to record a short video of self-introduction, right? So, and those are the kind of things you want to keep in mind about, okay, just like virtual interviews, your lighting, your sound, are you presenting yourself, how's your energy, all the nonverbal, right? Body language, all those things are important to keep in mind. And that is definitely a trend that is becoming more and more prevalent as well. So another way of sort of making you stand out is portfolios. And again, for many of you, this is not new to you, but I also wanted to, maybe start off with this, right? If you haven't started a portfolio, I know, you might know many of your friends are doing like a, full personalized, website with their, personalized domain, and it looks amazing. And you're like, oh my goodness, I don't even have enough work to get there, right? My encouragement is that start small, right? Even if you just put together, a few things in a Word file, turn it into a PDF, you can call it a portfolio, right? Put it on a slide deck and it turns it into a slideshow. That's a portfolio. Down the road, if you want to do your own personalized website, do that, right? And there are workshops coming up with the FCAT Pro that actually, that have to teach people how to do that. But the idea is that, it is about show more than tell. And on top of pictures, this is one way you can sort of frame around how you are able to sort of describe your work. Is this acronym called CAR, right? Challenge, action, and results. You want to describe a little bit of background information as a challenge, but also what is your responsibility, what you've done in action. But the most important part is, what's the result? what's the impact, right? So this is just a few slide deck from a former co-op student that we work with. And, so she developed, this, some of these posters and online promotion material and, Instagram, feeds, content. There's also a blog, right? Again, challenge, action, results. She also did a mini book, right? Again, talk about the challenge, action, and result. And when you have time to put a little bit together, like your work speaks for itself, right? And just think about that. You might not even know this fellow student's background, but just looking at this person's work, you probably learn a lot about her abilities, her experience, and it might not necessarily be just something visual, right? And this person did, did a lot of project management, and you can, and she was also able to sort of document that in her portfolio. And again, another student, Thomas Nakagawa, and basically what Thomas did is, he put together his own personal website, and and again, this might be like steps further down the road. Again, don't worry about starting small, but something is always going to be better than nothing. So show, don't tell. Let's talk about cover letters and interview, right? One of the important things when it comes to job application is that story is a really powerful thing, right? That storytelling, when you're not only you're describing what you can do and your experience and your skill, but if you can sort of put it in a narrative approach. As human beings, we all love great story, right? And what is important is that you also wanted to sort of combine, sort of the facts and things that you sort of integrate it in a story form. And that has a very amazing way of connecting with people. So think about your cover letter for a second, right? Are you just describing things that you're already describing in the resume? Or are you able to sort of take the bullet points that describe in your resume, but add a little bit of personal story, that personal passion and conviction and interest and all that in, that shows a little bit of personality, right? Shows a little bit of who you are. So that's one thing I want to highlight about cover letter. And Nicole, I know that this sort of story approach also worked really well in an interview setting. Would you like to tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. Did you want to show the video first, Albert?
Yeah. Do you want to set this up before I play this?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the story toolbox is a great tool that helps you prepare stories in advance, following, the CAR acronym that Albert was talking about, along with something called transfers, which can really help you in your interviews. And I will share an example afterwards.
All right. Nicole, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties playing the video. Maybe just give me a second here. Do you mind? What I'm going to do is instead of playing this on the PowerPoint, I'm going to do this on the browser.
Okay.
So give me a second there. We're almost there. Just need to share screen. Oops. Okay, just let me, there we go. Skip, that's perfect. So yeah, and this is a really interesting video from somebody. She referred herself to self-made millennial, and her name is Madeline, I think. So I might have got the name wrong, but anyways, check out this video. We're not going to have time to play the whole thing, so we're going to drop the link here if you're interested to watch the full thing, but we're going to watch a couple minutes of it. So
this is Self-Made Millennial. I'm Madeline Mann. Today I'm going to tell you the best way to answer questions in interviews. I am going to show you examples of before and after using this technique and the steps you can take to apply it to your interviews today. Seriously, if you were to only take one of my interview tips, then it would be this one. And the secret is this. This isn't any old toolbox. This is a story toolbox. And I'm going to teach you about how to put together your own metaphorical story toolbox so that you can nail your interviews. If you only get one thing from this video, it's this. People get jobs from telling epic stories. Let me hammer this into your head. People get jobs from telling epic stories. What most people do when they're, less experienced interviewees is that when they're asked a question like, what's your greatest strength? Or what's your leadership style? They begin to describe themselves. They say that they're a hard worker, a team player, that they're highly skilled. They toss this emotional word salad of what it would feel like to work together, but none of it gets down to, but what did you actually do? According to American psychologist Jerome Bruner, stories are up to 22 times more memorable than facts alone. What that tells me is that if you are not telling stories as often as humanly possible in your interviews, you risk becoming utterly forgotten. I mean, just think about it. When you were in high school and you had history teachers, did you like the one that made you memorize all the presidents in order, or did you like the one that told you all the war stories and told you about how one president got stuck in the bathtub? Now, I don't exactly remember what number President Taft was, but to this day, I remember the bathtub story. So the actual advice here is to go into your interviews with this toolbox of stories that you're prepared to tell. And these stories, you'll find, can fit into a lot of different questions that they ask. Trust me. Let me first share with you a few examples so that you can see the power of the story toolbox.
So instead of her sharing, Nicole, you actually have some examples for us. So let me do the switch screen and I'll let you explain that to everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Albert.
There we go.
All right. So basically how the story toolbox works is that you can either use the questions that are shown here on the left-hand side, or you can add your own. And then in correspondence to that question or prompt, you're going to write down a challenge. And a challenge is the context or background of the story. It's supposed to help you, paint the picture. And then next you have the action, which will be the responsibility or the role that you played to alleviate that challenge. And then you have the results. So, what was the impact? What was the benefit or prevention? What happened? And then lastly, you have the transfer. So now you want to take the story you wrote in your challenge, action, and result and explain how this can transfer over or relate to the job that you're applying for. So I've created a little example story to help better visualize what we mean. So the question or prompt is worked with a difficult person. So while I was working the cash register one day, an older lady came in and her card was not working. And she progressively began to get angrier with me when she was convinced that I was purposely not letting her card go through. So this was my challenge. You can see that I've sort of presented the context of the story. So then I decided to call my supervisor to the front and I informed him of the situation, and then I went to the back. After assessing the situation, I realized that I was actually triggering her, and I chose the best possible solution was to call my supervisor because I could tell that talking to someone else would help her. And it did. She calmed down and called her husband into the store to use his card instead. They paid for their groceries and they left. So in this example, you can see how I sort of segued from my action to the result. And then to transfer this skill into the job position, I would say that if there were ever a situation where I was working with a supervisor or a colleague who was under a heavy time crunch and was super stressed, I could use my ability to assess the situation and find how I could best help alleviate some of that stress. So the skill here is conflict resolution and or dealing with a difficult person or situation. And I've used an example to show how I could use this skill in my new job position. Albert, anything you wanted to add there?
Well, I just want to start by saying that's a very impressive story, right? At the same time, what I realized is that it's not, an example that you just sort of think on the spot, right? I would imagine, you probably spend a little bit of time, think about what are some of the, your work experience, what are some of the examples of that, and you sort of take the time to write it out, which sounds super impressive. So I feel like, my biggest takeaway in this is that we all have good stories. But these good stories does not come sort of like on the spot, like, to be able to articulate it so eloquently you need time to prepare to write it down. So one of the things about preparing for interviews is that a tool like a story toolbox gives you a chance to sort of write down a few different stories. What is the challenge, action, results, and transfer, so that when you're being asked certain questions, you can sort of pull some of these stories out of your back pocket and, blew them away, right? Your interviewees, just to be able to illustrate that with a concrete example. So thank you so much again, Nicole. So think about this, and again, the link of the video is in the chat, and you can definitely sort of save that and and learn a little bit more about this idea of story toolbox. Anything to add, Nicole, before we move forward?
No, I think we've covered it all.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's talk about another tool at your disposal. As SFU student, you have access to this site called Interview Stream. It is a paid site, but as an SFU student, we have a sort of institution license. So how it works is that it does two things. Number one, it is an interview practice sort of platform. It allows you to pick questions and pick questions that you want to be asked, and then when you actually run it, it basically set up an environment just like a virtual interview situation. So, and I can't say enough about practice, right? Because part of it is, in order to sort of ease some of that anxiety, take some of that, sort of uncertainty away. One of the things that you can do is just being able to say your answers over and over again, right? So again, Interview Stream, the link is there. You can create a free account as an SFU student and try out this tool, and you can even record it and share it with a career educator to get some feedback. That's also a good way to prepare for your interview. So we talk about many different ways of standing out. And again, having a resume, awesome, right? But at the same time, there are different ways of creating sort of applications and ideas that really make you stand out, right? Like, another example that I'm really impressed is, my wonderful colleague, Jill. So Jill, when she first applied to the job at Career and Volunteer Services, she actually created a little comic strip, and she storyboarded it, she put it together, and again, I'm looking at this, I'm so impressed. At the same time, I'm like, I don't even have close to the artistic talent that she has. What I'm trying to say is, do it creatively in your own way. Right? Maybe your talent is art, it's drawing. Maybe your talent is doing something else, right? So the idea is that you want to do something that is a little bit different, but again, showing your interest, showing your passion, and showing your skills by coming up with a creative application. And as much as we talk about resume and portfolio, right? One of the biggest trends, I know I'm pointing out the obvious, is LinkedIn, right? I think there's more and more hiring activities that are happening in LinkedIn. So that means, your profile, essentially is sort of like a master resume that includes all your accomplishment, everything that you've done is important, right? And again, I know that sometimes when I brought up this idea of LinkedIn, it could be a little bit intimidating. Like, for many of us who have no problems on TikTok, we're very good with Instagram. Of course, we know Facebook, but LinkedIn is just like, oh, like I'm nervous. Like, again, I can imagine some of that imposter syndrome when I first got out of school to join LinkedIn. I'm like, well, I don't have much experience. I don't have many friends. So part of it is, I always encourage that, look at this as a long-term project. Right? What I'm going to show you later on in terms of using LinkedIn, if you just created your account 5 minutes ago, you can use it. But at the same time, when you're able to start your LinkedIn account now, in a semester or two, or a year or two, right? Down the road, once you start building all these connections, then it becomes very very powerful tool. So it doesn't matter where you start, it's sort of that continuing effort, right? So looking at your LinkedIn profile tips, LinkedIn already give you a lot of tips in terms of completing your profile. But again, make sure you use industry keywords, especially to the field that you're applying to, and your headline, a summary, are important real estate, right? Again, because they're right at the top, right next to your name. Write profile summary statements that really show what you're interested or what you want to do or who you want to work with. That is very important. So make sure you take advantage of that. And one of the things about LinkedIn too is that sometimes I feel like every time I log in, maybe between weeks or sometimes a couple of months, they seem to have a new feature, right? So one of the things that, one of the things that you want to keep up is just learning how LinkedIn is also evolving, right? A little bit of a sort of on the side suggestion is there's also something called LinkedIn Learning. So LinkedIn bought this company called lynda.com, if somebody have heard of it. As an SFU student, we also have an institute license. I feel, I don't remember exactly, but if you were to do this on your own, like you probably have to pay more monthly than your Netflix account. So so this is completely free. So go to that link through the library, create an account for LinkedIn Learning specifically, and then you have access to these amazing learning videos. If you want to pick up a skill or two, or you want to develop certain things that you don't get to develop, but employers might need it, check out LinkedIn Learning as well. So at this point, I know we've been sharing a lot of things that are a little bit abstract or a little bit like strategies, like how do students sort of put it together, right? And and I wanted to share with you, stories from not one, not two, but 4 students, right? By no means they're like, oh, like they are the best students or they have, done this really amazing things. It all starts with one small thing, right? And but through that one small step, it led them to something else, and eventually they are able to sort of connect with other people that they otherwise won't able to connect. So let's talk about Karen's story. So Karen is a gerontology student, so is studying seniors and she's an international student, not a lot of connections, and she was close to graduation. She was wondering like, oh, how do I prepare my experience, and I know that, some of the questions in the registration also mentioned, well, I'm kind of a, new student to the country. I'm an international student. So one of the things that she did is she volunteered, right? But even while she was looking for volunteering, she wasn't sure where to go. So, she did the most sensible thing is she talked to her professor, and her professor said, oh, why don't you volunteer at this particular place? So her professor referred her to this place. And when she meet with the volunteer supervisor, obviously she started volunteering, but at the same time, she also said, oh, I'm also available to work part-time. And then in that conversation, the supervisor actually suggested, hey, why don't you look into this friend of mine who works in another organization? They are looking for work. And to fast forward, the story is that through this next person, she was able to identify a part-time work and she can continue to build her experience, right? So the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's not like she talked to one person and found a job, right? She talked to her professor, led to a volunteer, and that volunteer led to an opportunity. And so one of the quotes that she said is, what really makes a difference is networking. I got to know people. I started to know what's happening in the industry, what people are doing, how to speak like one of them. These all came into play in the interview. I don't think I could possibly answer those interview questions without learning from people in the field, right? So again, talking to people, start something small, and and it actually prepared her when she actually had that interview. Let's talk about the story of Tegan, right? Tegan is an environment, resource and environmental management recent grad. And she talked about that, in her experience studying abroad, she get to meet a lot of people who share the same passion about the climate crisis. And at the same time, she feel like she wanted to learn more. So she started her own blog called Climate Hope Project. And in fact, we have done an interview with Tegan. Nicole, if you just be so kind to drop the link on the chat. So if you're interested, feel free to check out her story on YouTube. So one of the really amazing thing is that through this particular blog, she's able to connect with like-minded people over the years while she is finishing her courses. And she was able to have some ideas and people that that she wants to work with, that offers her part-time work when she's about to leave school. So again, what her interest is is environmental crisis, and she decided to use a blog to be able to share that information with folks. Another story of another student, Sudeep. Sudeep actually is a volunteer that is volunteering at our current volunteer services. But at the same time, one thing he really wants to do is he wants to study business. But at that particular moment, he wasn't. He was studying, he wasn't able to get into BD. But one of the really smart thinking that he did is that, okay, I know a lot of my friends in business, they do this thing called case competitions, right? But he very soon realized that, he didn't need to be a business student to apply for this case competitions. So what he ended up doing is finding other friends who are also not in BD to put together this interdisciplinary team. And then they enter this case competition. And then they realized, wow, they did really, really, really well. I think they got they got into the finals as one of the top teams. And through that process, he was able to make a lot of professional connections with organizations that he wanted to work with, Collier, TransLink, David Suzuki Foundation. So to him, even though the most obvious doors weren't open, but he was able to find other doors to get in despite his circumstance. Last but not least, definitely not least, I want to share with you Nicholas' story. And Nicholas' story is really, sort of come near and dear to my heart, because this is also how sort of I find one of my first job after I graduate. So Nicholas, he is, at this time closer to his graduation, he was actually volunteering at a not-for-profit organization at the downtown East Side. He's really enjoying the time, and he wondered, well, how can I continue to do the work in this area, serving the folks in downtown East Side, especially young adults. So what he did is that, even while in his volunteering opportunities, he realized, wow, like there's so much work that this organization need to do, and some of the needs of his clients are not being met, and this is his volunteer. So what he did is that he put together a proposal, think about the work that he could do if the organization were to hire him. And he tried to set up, and he sent this to the CEO of the not-for-profit organization and asked if he can spend some time, with the CEO. So obviously the CEO was really impressed, and then, and that turned into a meeting, and a meeting turned into an official interview. And as a result, the organization created an opportunity based on the way Nicholas described it and offered him the job. And that was his sort of first big break after graduation to get his foot in the door, right? And this is a really amazing story because, again, it didn't start with him getting a job. It didn't even start with him coming up with an idea. Is that he was volunteering, he was interested, and now that he's, he is involved in the day-to-day as a volunteer, then he sort of think about, how can I contribute to this? How can I solve some of the issues and needs that this organization is trying to solve, right? So again, by no means that these stories are perfect story, but these just hopefully spark some creative ideas of how you're able to, take small steps and to be able to find creative ways to make you stand out among many, many other people who are also applying. And we're going to, and just wanted to sort of share highlighting some of these resources for students and also for alum. Some of these sites, again, these are embedded links in the slide, and we're going to be sharing with you with the even more comprehensive toolkit so that you can check out some of these websites and, and just learn a little bit more about the resources out there. All right. So, we still have about, 10 to 15 minutes of content. But at the same time, just wanted to, again, continue to encourage you to drop your questions on Slido. Or if you have any comments, you can put it in the chat. So we will be able to address it at the Q&A, or if there's something that is related to what I'm talking about right now, I'll definitely try to address the questions as well. So my next story, my next sort of student story to share with you is Hadil. So Hadil is a political science grad, and just before she graduated, she was asking the same questions that many of you are asking right now is, well, how do I get a job that is related to what I wanted to do, right? So one of the things that she focused on is, she looked through LinkedIn, and I don't want to give her story away, so I'm just going to play a part of her interview that we did with her last year. And Nicole, if you can be so kind to also drop the link of the full story while we're at it. We won't be able to show the full thing, but hear what Hadil has to say.
I made sure that I utilize LinkedIn. So I know a lot of times throughout the years, people were always like, just use LinkedIn, like LinkedIn's meant for that. And I'd be like, no, like I just rather not, like look at job postings, like I don't have to deal with that. But I reached a point where I was like, okay, like I know that I'm interested in policy. I know I'm interested in international development. So let me go on LinkedIn and look for some people that I can gain inspiration from, that I can learn from. So I started off by just on LinkedIn, I went on to like Global Affairs Canada, and then I clicked onto like the people to like look at certain people that worked there. And I just spent some time, like it was just in between, like when I was watching something or just doing other random stuff, I would just like search through a bunch of people and then look at their profiles. And if I felt like they were doing something that I wanted to do and they had like a similar experience than me, I would just straight up message them. And it's really kind of awkward when you think about like having to message this stranger. But I just thought to myself, like, I want to utilize them as another resource, right? Like they have a lot of insight into what they're doing, how they got there. And it's a good way for me to learn a little bit more. And also, like, a lot of these people want to have conversations. Like they've been through the struggle and they want to let people know how to make it easier. So I just picked, like, I think it was as an example, from the Global Affairs one, I picked like 5 to 6 people. And I just straight up messaged them like, hey, my name is Hadil. Like, I'm currently in my last semester of my undergrad. I'm interested in this. And based on looking at your profile, I see that you're working as this. And I was just wondering if I could gain some insights and knowledge into what you currently do and how you got there. And then, so that was basically like my script. And then I just attached if you have, I know you're busy, but if you have like 15 to 20 minutes of your time, like that would be greatly appreciated. And I sent that out to 6 people. And then I thought to myself, okay, don't take anything personally. Like not everybody responds, like it's not a big deal. And out of those 6 people, just from the Global Affairs one lady responded, and she responded a week late too. So it just kind of shows you that the way I think about it when it comes to reaching out is that what is the worst case scenario? And the worst case scenario is that they say no, right? And if they say no, they don't know me, they've never met me, they probably will never meet me. So it doesn't necessarily matter. Just focus on like the end goal of 1 out of those 6 people responding.
Yeah, thank you, Hadil. I know it's just a video, but I feel like I really want to thank her because she was so eloquently articulated the emotions that I go through. I'm like, what if people don't respond to me? Like, what if they like, don't want to answer my question? And I just felt like, what she made a really good point about, well, what's the worst that could happen, right? And if 1 out of 20, 30, 40 people responded, you got a chance to chat. And I get it, right? Not every one of these conversations will turn into a job, right? But if it turns into a conversation that helps you learn more about the area that you're interested, right? Like that's like, good intel, that you otherwise won't get, right?
Sure.
Oops, sorry. Let me just switch to a slide. Okay, so yeah, I really appreciate her story, and you probably wonder, how does she go about in doing that in terms of searching for people? So I want to do a really quick demo on the LinkedIn alumni tool. I know that this might be new to many of you. And again, I just want to emphasize that what I'm about to show you, you don't need to have an account for like an X number of connections. Even if you just create this account, like, 5 minutes ago, you can do this. So first thing you want to do, one of the ways is, you can search, Simon Fraser University. And in the university sort of account, you're able to look at, so hang on a second. So you basically go there. And then what it does is that, sorry, let me just widen this a little bit. There it is. So you can see there's a section called the alumni section. Essentially, this basically lists people who, declare themselves to be an alumni of SFU, right? So some of you might wonder, like, let's just give an example, like, oh, hey, I am a communication major. And I wonder, where are the communication major working right now and the kind of job that they do, right? So you can go in there and, sort of go through the columns and find what they study. And you're like, okay, this is exactly what I study, communication and media studies, right? And when you click this, and it filters down the gazillion, alumni to, not a lot, just 3,000, right? So I'm just kidding. But what I'm trying to say is, if you look at, these are all the people that are graduated, and you're probably graduated with the same program that you are. And you're probably wondering, like, where are they working right now? Or maybe they're like, okay, I'm really interested in working for the Canucks, right? Like, I'm biased because I am a hopeless, Canucks fan, even though they don't make the playoffs so many years in a row. I still cheer for them. Anyways, so there are 14 people that are a communication grad and they have some connection with Canucks. So I'm like, okay, this is the first person I see. Stephanie, I wonder what Stephanie experience is. So basically what I'm trying to say is, she actually worked as a 50-50 program coordinator or whatever, right? So this is really interesting to see the different ways of how people sort of career journey, right? What you will very soon realize is that they all have a very unique way of ended up doing what they're doing. But you're also able to see, what organizations that they've worked at and where their journey. And if you're interested, sort of send them a message and say, hey, like, I'm a, SFU, comp student. I'm really interested in what you've done. I also want to learn a little bit more about, what you experience after graduation. Can I talk to you, right? Or can I set up a 15-20 minute Zoom conversation, right, with you, right? So this is, I just want to quickly show you is because it's such a powerful tool to connect with people that is beyond your circle, right? Again, I'm a first generation university students. My parents and many of my relatives are not professional. So I wish, back in the day when I was, there is something like this to help me to connect with people that I have no way of connecting with. So this is the LinkedIn alumni tool. And like Hadil was saying, right, reaching out, send them a message, use that sort of fellow alum, sort of play that card, or or your student. And again, one thing that, again, this is I've learned from other employers, not just my own perception, is that there are a lot more nice people than sometimes we think. Like I sometimes are definitely guilty of thinking that, oh, nobody has time for me, like I'm just a student, right? But at the end of the day, like, I think there are a lot of people who probably have been helped along when they were a student, and they always love to pay it forward. So you just never know. And when you're only asking for sort of 15-20 minutes of their time, it's something that is relatively realistic, right? And especially in the age of Zoom, they don't need to go to a cafe, they don't need to drive somewhere, they just need to log on for 15 minutes and they're done, right? So it's much easier ask. So I'm just gonna, so think about some of these interview requests, keep it short. One thing I want to highlight is, you're not asking for a job opportunity. You're not asking, for an opportunity specifically. However, when you are showcasing that you're interested, you're learning, if there is actually an opportunity, you'll probably hear about it too, right? So the idea is that to keep the conversation open and learn as much as you can. So I've also included some interview sort of email or messages samples there. You're going to see that, you're going to see this in the slides that we're going to send you afterwards. So definitely check this out. One more resource I want to share with you is something called the LinkedIn Guys. So LinkedIn Guys are people who used to work for LinkedIn, and then they've created this amazing tutorial for anyone who wants to figure out how to leverage some of the functionality of LinkedIn in your job search. So there's a whole online course that you can sign up for free as an SFU student. Check, so go to this link, create an account, and you can learn a little bit more about how you can use LinkedIn more effectively. So, and again, once you sort of are able to set up an interview with someone, what questions are you going to ask, right? So some of these examples are there, but obviously you want to think about questions in advance, questions that you want to learn a little bit more about, but you cannot really find out through just Googling or looking at a website for yourself, right? So you want to go in, prepare, have those questions prepared, because you don't have 5 hours talking to them. You don't even have 2. You only got 15-20 minutes. So you want to think about the best questions you can ask. And of course, you would like to thank them, their time. send them send them an email, send them a LinkedIn message to thank them, invite them on LinkedIn, get connected, right? And perhaps there are things that they talked about their challenges at work. If there's some information and ideas, right? Or even like a little sort of, value validation sort of argument or project to show that, hey, like I can be part of the solution, right? Maybe that's another thing you can also consider after you talk to them. So another really, really good tool, like again, there's not enough other 3 hours for us to go through all the resources. But one thing that we put together is something called the Career Action Toolkit. It's only, jokingly saying 6 pages. There's lots of different websites. So I understand that, all of us are coming from different background, even though we're all sort of part of FCAT. But depending on your program, depending on what you're interested, you might be looking for different types of information, right? They're not necessarily organized by sort of industry per se. So you sort of have to sort of apply it to your own situation. But definitely check out the Career Action Toolkit. And Nicole, are you able to drop the link there? Did I include that in the slides? So if you can drop that in the in the chat, that would be great. Another question that another resource I also want to share with you is something called the How Do I Find Where to Find Remote Work guide that we put together. There are a couple of you who ask questions about, well, how do I find remote work, or how do I find work to do that? So basically, we've also put together, amazingly many students ask us that. So that's why we put together this remote work guide for all of you. Thank you again, Nicole. There's also the link there. So if you go to our webpage, you'll be able to download it. You'll see it right in the middle called Where to Find Remote Work Guide. So that's another really good resources. If you're contemplating remote work, part-time work, while you're finishing your courses, check out that guide for some information and ideas. So next steps. So, again, we've covered a lot of information, ideas, strategies. I'm keenly aware that it might be a bit of an overkill, but sort of in a sort of try to highlight a few things in a high level way. 5 things, right? Meet people who are where you want to be, right? Part of it sometimes is we don't even know what are the different opportunities out there. We don't know the organizations. We don't even know the roles. But by learning, sort of through the LinkedIn tool and through the research, you can, you wanted to know a little bit more about what are the opportunities out there, right? And also meet people who are in the area that you're so fascinated and curious about. Talk to them. Meet them, right? And again, I can't emphasize enough, like, where do I find these people randomly, right? So hopefully some of these stories that we talked about, LinkedIn, volunteering, just talk to someone, I always sort of look at it as one door opens another door, right? Right now, you might only know so little about what you want to do. But by talking to someone, by starting volunteering, by doing something, leads to another, leads to another, leads to another thing, right? So number 2, get support with your materials and strategy, right? I mean, we didn't even go over sort of the conventional resume cover letter stuff, but we wanted to highlight some of those really creative and new ideas to add on top of the traditional sort of resume, right? So get support on that, through us, and do your research online as well. Obviously, don't just tell, stories, portfolios, casual conversations, those goes a long way, right? If there's a job you want, find ways that you can do the job now, and I can't say enough about that is, sometimes if there is an aspect of work that you're fascinated, but may require things that you might not have so much experience, for example, project management, right? What can you sort of volunteer or maybe start so that you can get some of that project management experience that, that fulfills one of the things that what employers are looking for in the work that you wanted to do. Last but not least is adopt a problem-solving mindset, right? How can you be part of the solution? How can you, and again, this is not to say that who do you think, sometimes I feel like, who do I think I am to be able to solve people's problems? Sometimes it's not just necessarily just your ability at the moment, but the fact that you know what the problem is, or you've learned about what the problem is. You think about it, you do your research, you become a student of that problem. And in that process, you might gain some new insight, right? You might have discovered how other people have solved that, and you learn that, and you sort of like, hey, I've done some research, and this is how other people have done it in these organizations, and I can help you, because I've been learning about this, right? What I'm trying to say is you can be part of the solution only because you are 2 steps ahead as a student learning about that problem, right? So I can't say enough about don't feel like you don't know anything. If there's something that you want to learn, if you put the time in, you could just be you just need to be a step or 2 ahead. And one thing I cannot, say enough about is finding people that can be in this journey with you, right? So there's this great quote from this article of that quote, an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? So how do we go together, right? And definitely as a career educator, I was grateful that I can share a lot of these ideas with you, right? But for example, we also talk about sort of the wellness aspect of it. For many, it could be challenging to sort of manage that anxiety and uncertainty that you're going through right now. Maybe what you also need someone in your corner is a counselor, right? And we're going to talk a little about resources later. But at the same time, it's not just professionals, right? Think about, your friends. And I want to share with you this one example is that I was working with a student who just graduated during the pandemic. Obviously, she was really overwhelmed. It's hard to find a job. This is earlier in the pandemic. And one of the best thing I've heard, and again, you'll be surprised how simple it is that her and a couple of her friends decided that we're just going to meet every Saturday morning and do job search, right? You might be thinking it's like, oh, it might be like a study group. They're like really intense. But what she told me is that, sometimes we actually do job search, but some other time we just talk, we eat snacks, we joke around, right? But you're like, how is this an effective method, right? But as I was talking to her, I learned so much that, wow, she was getting a lot of emotional support. She was telling her friends how brutal it is, the waiting game, the disappointment, the frustration, and her friends share that with her, and they're all going through this together. So she felt like when she go back to like doing the resume, connecting to people the other 5 days of the week, she's like, okay, I got this. I have friends who are going through this with me. So again, it's not just professionals, but getting together with other friends who are also going through this together goes a long, long way. And yeah, and Nicole, I know that we talked about this before. There's so much sort of, emotional sort of roller coaster we go through in job search. And I know that you sort of have a little bit of personal story to share with us. Do you want to take the time to talk to us about your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really important to actually talk about the sort of roller coaster that you go through when you're job searching, because it does get tough and there's really no question about it. And I think that constantly applying at places and maybe not getting called back for an interview can be really frustrating and upsetting. And as co-op students, we apply at lots of different places, and most of the time you don't get called back for an interview. And it's really disheartening, especially because of all the hard work that you put into each application. And then eventually, you get tired, you get frustrated. And so as I was going through one of those downs of job searching, I got called in for an interview for a government position, which I really, really wanted. But because I was in a sort of rut where I was tired and my self-esteem was low and I wasn't confident, I was not as prepared as I could have been for that interview. And I actually didn't get the job. At first, I felt quite stupid, to be honest, because they asked me questions that I should have had answers for, but I didn't. So after a while of feeling upset, I actually decided to do a reflection on the interview and to write down what I did well, because it's important, to acknowledge the positive things and the things that you worked hard on. And then I wrote things down that I could have done better. And I actually went back and did some research on the things that, they asked me questions about that I didn't have answers for. And after taking all the cons of my interview performance, I worked extra hard on those specific things when I was preparing for a different interview, which I actually ended up getting the job for. So the moral of the story is that even if you were going through a rough patch in your job search, you can always, make the choice to pick yourself back up and try again. And there are many support systems in place to help you with that too, which we will share with you shortly and after the session as well.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And yeah, and I just want to say that, like, we all have sort of different challenges, different background, but one thing that, for sure is that, if you have some really complex emotions as you're going through job search, you're definitely not the only one. And so I just want to say that, like, we're definitely here to help as career educators, as well as, counseling support through health and counseling. So these are some of the well-being support here at SFU. Again, you don't have to copy and paste that, that these slides will be available. But, but again, going back to the idea is that you sort of going through this journey, even though you're searching a job for yourself, but you don't have to do it, alone, right? So sort of like what are the people you want to have in your corner? What are the support that you can get so that you're well prepared for this journey that could be challenging. On that note, we are just, going to open up the floor. And again, I've only seen one question in the Slido so far. So Nicole, if you don't mind dropping the Slido link again, if folks missed that, definitely you can go to Slido and continue to drop questions. I also have questions from the registration that I can cover as well. So we're going to do questions for about 10 minutes and then before we wrap up the session at 12:30. So, and again, I forgot to mention that this is an anonymous platform. You can also vote on some of these questions. So definitely there's a lot of privacy though, so don't feel like no questions are silly, right? So any questions are definitely legitimate, and I wanted to cover that. Okay, so let's look at the first question. So I am currently searching for an online job opportunity. Would love to get a recommendation of a good online platforms that offer jobs related to my communication major, right? This is a really, really good question because I feel like there are questions behind this question, right? So obviously for some jobs and some roles, there could be some specific sort of platform or job search engines. Like for example, if you're into sort of, really sort of technical work, in terms of in terms of gaming and then graphics design, there are websites specific for that. But one thing I really want to point out is there is no such thing as these are, maybe I'll take a step back. Even when we say a communications major, right? Think about all the different roles that you can take on, and again, remember I was just showing you the LinkedIn alumni to think of the variety of roles that people are taking, so are able to take on. Because one thing I can't emphasize enough is that your education obviously is a big part of who you are as a person, but there's also skills, volunteer experience, personal background, your values, your conviction, things that you're interested in, that makes you sort of the holistic or complete person. So the idea is that your opportunities or your, or things that you might be interested in may be beyond what is most often associated with your major, right? So depending on a couple of things, if at this point you're already identifying, okay, I really want to be in communication, sort of officer type of role, I'm really interested in marketing, that's perfect, right? But if you're like, I'm a communications grad, but I'm not really sure what my options are, right? So part of it is look beyond just the obvious and see if there are other things that might also, encourage you, right? Not to mention that even when we say sort of, let's say a communicator role, right? Or a communication officer type of role, depending on what organizations that you're working in, the job could be very different. How you do your job could be very different, right? So I can't emphasize enough sort of the variety, even within one job title, one industry. So part of it is, we don't know what we don't know. So part of that process too is before, as you're applying, also explore what are the different opportunities that are out there, which leads to the very good, which segue nicely to the next question is, what are good places to search for jobs? And I mostly know of Indeed. What are other places are available? So definitely check out the the Career Action Toolkit. On top of that, let me just quickly show you a couple of things. And these are just from I am, sorry, I can multitask at the same time. I just want to share screen first, and then do this. Okay. All right, there we go. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the places you can look for is actually, Google job posting, right? One of the things that, and I'm not saying just Google within Google, is there's something called, right down there, explore jobs, right? So this is actually Google's sort of job posting site. And you can also see, what are some of the things that are available, for example, let's say, communication, right? And then sort of looking at, using this one. So this is one possibility. And again, I would never say one is better than the other, but I really like the thinking, what you're thinking, like the person who posted a question, that you want to try a few different ones, right? Just to sort of try it out. Another really cool, thing to look at is if you Google LinkedIn who is hiring, LinkedIn, would I shouldn't say occasionally, they regularly put together something called who is hiring in Canada. Again, I'm not assuming that, you'll work anywhere in Canada, just want to drop the link there. But this is actually a good article, because this is somebody like an editor that goes through all the different activities on LinkedIn and sort of just highlighting what's happening right now. Right. Again, this just to give you an idea that, oh, like I'm really fascinated working for like Amazon or Indigo, right? Oh, they are hiring now. Like, again, getting an idea of who is hiring, what's happening out there, give you, just sort of give you a sense of like, again, this gives you a sense of who is hiring right now. Okay, so move on to the next question. How are we doing with time? Okay, we can still definitely touch on a couple more. I'm an international student coming from high school, and will be starting my first semester at SFU this summer. Oh, amazing! I'm glad that you join us. Does SFU has resources to help me find my first job? Right. So maybe I would this is probably a good prompt for me to share this. Definitely, right? Definitely connect with career and volunteer services. There are different ways that we, support our students. Workshops being one of them. You can also book appointment. At the same time, definitely check out the slides that we will share with everyone. Right? There is the career action toolkit. There's the remote work. There are some resources that can, also on our website, if you go to sfu.ca/career, I'm just going to type that in. Oh, maybe Nicole, you can help me with that. Just the website of Career Volunteer Services. But I get it, right? Sometimes it's like, there's so much information, I don't even know where to start. And if you want to sit down with a career educator to talk about this, and one thing I can't say enough about is that, regardless of where you are, if you felt like you haven't started, anytime is a good time to start. But if you are a first-year student, second-year student, one of your best friend is time, right? You have time to volunteer, you have time to, build up your experience. And the earlier that you start thinking about your career possibilities, the more information you're going to gather along the way in your university experience. So so it's never too early to start asking those questions. So at this point, like if you still have questions, keep them coming. But I also wanted to share a quick poll with you. So as basically as we're preparing for this particular workshop, we're wondering, how the participants feel about this. So I've got 3 questions. So hopefully you're seeing that on your screen right now, a post-event feedback poll. Just some multiple choice answer. If you can take a minute just to answer that. That would be great. It will give us some feedback, not just about this particular workshop, but something that we can work with, the fine folks at FCAT, such as Victoria and Naomi, to see what other workshops that we can offer to FCAT students in the future. There is also, a question on how you would prefer to receive career support, right? So the person who asked about like, are there any resources, right? Like all those things are actually available. So we want to get a sense of who you want more. I know in question 2, there's a choice 6. I think that's just a little mistake on my part. Just ignore that. There's no choice 6. It's kind of like blank. So at this point, maybe I just want to pass this time back to, Victoria. I can definitely stick around to answer more questions, but I just want to see Victoria or Naomi, do you have any sort of wrap up comments before, before we wrap this up?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to say a big thank you to you and Nicole as well for hosting the workshop today and sharing all your knowledge. I know like that was something I like resounded with or like understood as well as a co-op student who has, this is my first position that I've been in, so I definitely went through that same kind of like interview process, and I would say the story toolkit is definitely a big help for like preparing for interviews and just feeling less nervous. So yes, I just wanted to shout out that that like tip. And then yeah, just again say just you can connect with career and volunteer services if you have any further questions, or if you want a more like one-on-one appointment and can get some more specific suggestions as well from them. That's awesome. So yeah, I'll also be sharing the resources again after to everyone who signed up by email, so you can refer to them and everything like that. So yeah, lastly, I just wanted to say if you're interested, on Tuesday, we'll also be having one more FCAT Pro workshop for the month of April, and it's going to be Photoshop basics. So if you'd like to learn some Photoshop, then you should stop by and you can sign up for that. And then also in May, we're probably going to have a like conference / presentation skills type of workshop. So stay tuned for that as well. And then yeah, I'll just pass it off to Naomi if she wanted to add any comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to Albert and Nicole. It's always great working with our friends in career services, and I'd really encourage you to connect with them. They have, as you can tell from this morning, lots of great resources and workshops. So please connect with them more. And just a huge thank you. And please check out the workshop next week if you are interested in that as well. I think that's it from me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you again. Thank you again for having us. And I'm just going to relaunch the poll again. Maybe there's some technical difficulties. I don't know. Everybody was able to see it. And I know sometimes depending on which platform or device that you're using, the poll might not pop up. So let us know if you have any problems, but we definitely appreciate your feedback on a couple of multiple choice questions to give us some ideas. So yeah, and again, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So thank you again for spending your precious morning with us. We wanted to let you know that this is perhaps the busiest time for many of us in the semester. So thank you for being here. We wanted to support you. And if you have any questions, so reach out to us, and Nicole and I, we're going to stick around for a few more minutes. So if you want to ask a question in a more private setting, you're definitely welcome to stick around. We will not close down the Zoom room yet. But if you want to go, that's definitely understandable, and that's okay. And we wish you all the best for the rest of your semester and all the best in your job search journey as well. So thank you for being here with us this morning.
One last thing I forgot to mention, I did record everybody's attendance for CCR credit. So thank you as well for that. And thank you everybody for coming. It's always nice to see people from across the FCAT schools, and we had a nice mix today, so that's good.
Yeah, and thank you again for many of you who participated the poll. Definitely we will get some ideas to see how we can offer more opportunities because I think an hour and a little bit is sort of barely scratching the surface of all the things that we want to share with you. You can probably get a sense of how fast I was talking, but we definitely wanted to support you in the future. So yeah, I think it's 12:31. So I guess this is sort of like the unofficial portion now is pretty informal. So if you have any questions, you can use Slido, you can you can drop it in the chat, thank you, Grace. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Dia. And if you have questions, you can also drop in the chat or unmute, whichever way is easier for you. So, we'll stick around. We'll probably just have some casual chat. Yeah, thank you, Maria, as well. So yeah, so definitely feel free to let us know if you have any questions. And feel free to DM me too. Like if you have a private question, I'll try to answer it anonymously if we really need to. We can also do a little bit of a breakout room, for a really, really quick conversation. If you have something sort of personal that you want to ask. Oh, I just realized that there's another question on the, on the slide. Oh, I hope the person, you're still here. So sorry, I just see that. I have a wide range of skill in art, but I always feel like my skills are not as advanced for these job opportunities. How to deal with the feelings of not good enough? Oh my, like I totally hear you. I think I think that resonate with me, right? No matter how much skills that we have, there is always that sense of like inadequacy, like, am I good enough, right? I think part of it is, again, first of all, I want to say I'm no counselor. So, you can definitely, this could be potentially a much sort of deeper issue in terms of how you think. But generally, from the career education perspective, I would say is that sometimes we just need opportunities to demonstrate our skills, meaning that, I know I can do this, but sometimes it's hard for people to get an idea of how good you are. So that's why I say if you have opportunities to volunteer or to do some of these projects that build up your portfolio, especially with things that people can, your skills would be evident through your work. Right. So when you put together a portfolio, you don't necessarily have to take the time to sort of explain because the work in some way speaks for itself. Right. So, but on the flip side, this is not just so that you have a chance to quote and unquote prove it to employers or people that you want to work with in the future, but also to yourself. Right. It's sort of like, okay, I know I can do this, but how do I really know that I can or cannot? Right. So part of it is just give yourself lots of opportunities to practice because I can certainly remember that when I was doing my undergraduate, like this feeling of like, I don't think I'm good enough. Like, it's always in the back of my mind. But part of what was really helpful is that when I was doing my volunteering, I was actually volunteer with an organization to produce a radio show on a weekly basis. And, I know radio is an ancient technology, imagine it as like a podcast. And because we have to do the show on a weekly basis, so I have to do the research, I was hosting, I was doing the post-production. And all of this, I'm like, I don't even know how do I do this, right? But again, I ended up doing that volunteer role for about 3 years. And when I look back, I'm like, wow, like I've done this. Like, wow, I guess I've learned this over the years. What is really cool about having a chance to volunteer and do stuff is that you're probably developing as a person in terms of your skills and your maturity without yourself even knowing, right? It's just sort of like when you have the privilege of hindsight, then you realize, wow, like I was better than before, right? So again, part of it is, sometimes I can imagine we could get stuck in thinking about, am I good enough? Am I not good enough? But one small suggestion I want to say is, practice, have example to, have opportunities to showcase, to develop, right? And again, on the flip side, some of us might think that our skills are fantastic. We can tackle on any job, right? Even for those folks, you still need to practice to be able to continue to hone your skills. So I don't know, like I hope I answer, perhaps shed some light. I don't want to say because this is a really, really good question, a very deep one in our hearts as well. So I don't want to assume one simple answer could solve the entire issue, but definitely reach out to connect with career educators and counselors, because I feel like this is such an important because sometimes when we walk into the interview, not to say that like, oh, we're the best, you have to hire me. But I think that sense of self-assurance that, hey, like I can do this job, or, a little bit of self-confidence go a long, long way in terms of how you're being perceived as a candidate, right? So I can't say enough about how important this is. So I really, really appreciate this question. And again, there's no easy answer, but but checking in to how you feel about yourself, how you feel about that sense of confidence, is actually very important. So thank you so much for that question. All right. So anyone else? I know that there's still a few of you hanging around, so feel free to drop the question. Oh, thank you, Ashley. Yeah, okay, no, I appreciate that. And feel free to follow up if there are things that you thought about, and I can continue to sort of have this dialogue with you. But that's a great question. I really appreciate that. All right. Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to see the results of the poll. Just want to get a sense of, if you want to get a sense of what everyone's feedback is. Again, again, we'll continue to try to work with the fine folks at FCAT in terms of how we can support students. So yeah, many of you seem to like the workshops and career fairs. Again, there are different ways to get career education support, and thank you for all the feedback that you share with us. So yeah, Nicole, Victoria, Naomi, I definitely apologize for just, sort of, monopolizing, the talk. I just want to see anything you want to share or anything anyone want to ask.
No, all good. I was just gonna say I could stop recording now, and then if there are any questions, then people can ask that, but it just won't be recorded. But yeah, maybe I'll stop now since we've got lots of great info, I think, people can watch and see later. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know that a lot of the information was quite packed together.